ग्लोबल स्किल डेवलपमेंट मिशन में आपका स्वागत है।
Okay, now next, let's take a look at some of the tools of the graphic design trade. There's lots to get into here, so you may want to get your notepads ready. Let's start off with the most obvious tool, and that is Adobe Photoshop. And as we had discussed earlier on, Adobe Photoshop is our raster graphics editor. So, do you remember what a raster graphic is? A continuous tone image that's created out of pixels, like a photograph or a scan or a photo that you take with your digital camera, something like this, okay? Now, Photoshop really is geared towards, as the name would imply, photo touch-up or applying special effects to photographs or compiling or compositing multiple photos together to create a montage, things like this, okay? You can also use it for creating special effects on text and things of that nature as well. A lot of web designers rely on Adobe Photoshop, even though Adobe Photoshop isn't built specifically for web design. It's one of those things where they've been using Photoshop for years and years, so when they go to build a website, they turn to the tool that they use the most, Adobe Photoshop. So Photoshop over the years has been adding on more and more web design related tools, but it's really not built to build website layouts and wireframes. What I mean by a wireframe is like a rough layout, a rough blueprint almost for a website. Okay, but it is possible to do this sort of thing inside Photoshop. Photoshop really is not good at all for print layouts. So imagine a brochure or a business card or a flyer, something like this. Photoshop is not built for that type of work. And it really is not very good at all for logo design either. And any kind of a layout that has a lot of text, again, that's not really what Photoshop is built for, whether it's web or print, okay? So really, to kind of bottom line it, think of the name Photoshop. Anything that we did in a traditional darkroom, that's what Photoshop is for. Color correcting images, compositing images, cleaning images up, this sort of thing. Okay, that's what Photoshop is all about. Now, his twin sister, Illustrator, is sort of the opposite. We talked about Illustrator earlier on. Don't forget that Adobe Illustrator is our vector graphics editor. Do you remember what a vector graphic is? So think of things like logos or graphical elements, icons, things like this. Okay, and that's really what Illustrator is all about. We can use Adobe Illustrator to create and design logos. It's really great at that type of work, creating icons or buttons or any kind of vector graphical elements. Okay, that's really where it shines. Okay, now it can also be used for wireframing and layouts on the web design side. That's perfectly fine. In fact, I use Adobe Illustrator for that type of work all the time, and it's great at handling that kind of work, but it's not very good at handling raster graphics. It can handle them to a degree, but it's really not a dedicated raster graphics editor. It's a vector graphics editor, right? So handling raster graphics can be tricky, and laying out for print, it is possible to use Illustrator to lay out business cards and signage and brochures and things like that. It is possible in Illustrator. I know a lot of graphic designers use Illustrator in that capacity, but that's not really what Illustrator was built for, okay? All right. Hopefully, so far, so good. What else do we have? Well, next up, we have Adobe Dreamweaver. Have you heard of Dreamweaver before? It's been around for years and years. It's what's referred to as a WYSIWYG editor or a WYSIWYG web editor. What that means is what you see is what you get. So we see inside Dreamweaver the web layout as it would appear for the visitors to our website, but we can edit the website inside this interface. Okay, so you can get into code, specifically HTML and CSS. That's perfectly fine, but Dreamweaver will allow you to work just in a visual view or a visual format, if that makes sense. Okay, it's really, really great for those just getting started in web design or those who are perhaps at somewhat of an intermediate level in web design. Okay. And it's really great at handling small to medium-sized static websites, okay? What I mean by a static website is we can have a static website, which is just kind of a plain, regular website, or we can have a database-driven website. Let me talk about that, because Dreamweaver has a bit of a hard time handling more complex websites, and in particular, websites that are database driven. So, in other words, a website that has all of its information, all of its content stored on a web server inside of a database, and that content is going to automatically populate the web templates. Think of a site like eBay or even Amazon.com. Amazon isn't creating all of the individual pages one at a time. The content, the products, and perhaps it's a book. So the book and the author and the publisher and the price, all that information is stored inside of a database. So while Dreamweaver can handle sites like this, when they get to a particular size, it gets a little bit too much for Dreamweaver. We certainly could not use Dreamweaver to build an Amazon-type website. I suppose we could, but it would be a heck of a lot of work, and there are easier methods. Okay, next up we have Adobe InDesign. What's up with Adobe InDesign? Have you heard of InDesign before? Well, Dreamweaver is our web design tool. InDesign is going to be our print layout tool. So it's going to handle all of our print projects, from small projects to large projects, okay? So think of things like brochures, business cards, textbooks, flyers, any kind of content or any kind of a project that's going to wind up in physical print. InDesign can handle it, from a business card to a 1,000-page textbook, okay? So there you go. It can also be used to build interactive documents and ebooks, which is really, really cool if you're interested in that sort of thing. But it's not good at all for building websites. I believe it has a few tools in there that allow you to use it to build websites, but it's really not intended to be a web design tool at all. Okay? All right. Now, I've got one more here for you, and this is kind of the wild card in here, Adobe Acrobat. You probably know a little bit about Acrobat already, the free Adobe Reader, or Acrobat Reader as it's sometimes referred to. What I'm talking about here is the big brother to Adobe Reader. This would be Acrobat Professional. Okay, so there's a version of Acrobat that includes a ton of editing tools that allow us to get in and work with our PDF files. So what sorts of things can we do with our PDF files? Well, Acrobat Professional is going to allow us to open and edit and mark up PDF documents. Okay? We can use it to create interactive documents. We can insert multimedia into PDF files. Not a lot of people know that you can do this stuff, by the way. You can actually insert video and audio into PDF files. You can create clickable hyperlinks and set interactive events. What I mean by that is when the user of my PDF file goes to page 5, something is going to happen. What kind of something? An audio file is going to play. A website is going to launch. Some kind of interactive event is going to take place. You can build all this stuff into PDF files. And like I say, not a lot of people know that you can actually do this with Acrobat. It's great. We can also use the professional version of Acrobat to build interactive or self-running slideshows. So think of a slideshow that's running at a kiosk at a trade show, or perhaps you're running a presentation. You could use Acrobat to set up that slideshow. Okay? It can also be used for document revision and editing. And this is what I meant earlier on in my first point where I said mark up PDF documents. Let's say that you and I are working on some kind of a large document together. I'm the author, you're my editor. Well, I could write the content and then save the file as a PDF and then send it to you. You could open it up and start marking it up, literally, as we would, traditionally with a red pen. You could strike things out, you could add notes, you could suggest changes, and then send it back to me all electronically. Okay, it's very, very cool, and it's widely used as well. What I have to stress, though, because people get a little bit confused by Acrobat, Acrobat is not a layout tool, and furthermore, it is not a content creation tool. It's going to edit content that you've created somewhere else, whether that's Microsoft Word, or a lot of my PDFs come out of Adobe InDesign. So I create the content, the layout, the structure in InDesign, for example, save it as a PDF file, open it up in Acrobat Professional, and then edit it once it's in the PDF format further. So I hope that makes sense. There's an overview of some of the industry standard tools of the graphic design trade.